Studies show that being ignored activates the same region of the brain as physical pain. Not metaphorical pain. Literal, measurable, neurological pain. Someone simply stops responding to you. No argument, no explanation, no closure. And your brain processes it the same way it processes a broken bone. Now think about the last time someone went cold on you. A partner, a parent, a colleague. They didn't yell, they didn't threaten, they just disappeared into silence. And somehow, that was worse than anything they could have said. Here's the question you need to sit with. Were they protecting themselves, or were they punishing you? Because those two things look identical from the outside, and the difference between them will determine whether you're in a healthy relationship or a psychological trap. Welcome to TheMindShadow. This channel exists for one reason: to hand you a flashlight in the dark corners of human behavior. Not to frighten you, to prepare you. The silent treatment is everywhere. It lives in relationships, in workplaces, in families. Most people experience it and blame themselves. They spend hours, sometimes days, replaying every word they said, searching for what they did wrong. And that search is exactly what the silence was designed to create. But here's what almost no one tells you. Silence is a tool. Like any tool, it can build or destroy depending on who's holding it and why. By the end of this, you'll know how to tell the difference. You'll understand what it does to your mind, how it's deployed as a weapon, and what it looks like when it's actually self-defense. Let's start with what the silent treatment actually is and what it isn't. At its most basic, it's the deliberate withdrawal of communication as a response to conflict or perceived offense. The key word is deliberate. This isn't someone who needs an hour to cool down. This isn't someone processing quietly before a difficult conversation. This is a calculated decision to make you feel invisible. Psychologists call the extreme version of this ostracism. And researcher Kipling Williams at Purdue University spent over 2 decades studying it. What he found was striking. Even brief episodes of being ignored, sometimes as short as a few minutes, triggered immediate drops in self-esteem, a sense of loss of control, and feelings of existential threat. Your brain doesn't distinguish between being ignored by a stranger in a lab and being ignored by someone you love. It registers both as danger. Now consider how this plays out in a long-term relationship. One partner raises a concern. The other goes silent, not for an hour, but for days. No eye contact, single word answers, if any. A cold, impenetrable wall. The first partner spirals. They apologize for things they didn't do. They soften their original complaint. They begin to question their own perception of reality. And the person behind the wall? They haven't said a single word. They haven't had to. The silence did all the work. This is the architecture of control without confrontation. It's elegant, in a disturbing way, and it works because it exploits something fundamentally human, our desperate need to belong. Let's go deeper, into your nervous system. When you're subjected to the silent treatment, your brain doesn't sit quietly and wait. It activates. The anterior cingulate cortex, the region that processes physical pain, lights up. Simultaneously, your threat detection system, the amygdala, goes on high alert. You are now in a state of social threat response. And here's what makes this particularly insidious. Your brain begins to generate explanations. It hates uncertainty more than it hates pain. So it starts filling in the blanks. It starts writing a narrative. And because you're already feeling threatened, that narrative tends to be self-condemning. You assume the worst about yourself. You assume the fault is yours. Psychologists call this self-blame attribution, and it's automatic. It bypasses rational thought entirely. This is why the silent treatment is so effective as a control mechanism. The person using it doesn't need to gaslight you directly. Your own mind does it for you. The silence creates a vacuum, and anxiety fills it with self-doubt. There's also something called the need to belong theory, developed by Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary. Their research demonstrates that social connection isn't a preference. It's a fundamental human need, as basic as food and shelter. Threatening that connection triggers survival-level distress. The person using silence against you understands this, consciously or not. They know that cutting off connection creates pain. And they've learned, probably through years of conditioning, that pain produces compliance. The relationship dynamic shifts. You become focused not on the original issue, but on ending your own suffering. And ending your suffering means repairing the relationship on their terms. Now let's talk about the practical reality. How is this used against you in daily life? And how do you recognize it before it rewires your behavior? First, understand the pattern. Manipulative silence follows a cycle. There's a trigger, usually your expression of a need, a boundary, or a disagreement. Then comes the withdrawal. Then your anxiety peaks. Then you pursue. You reach out, you apologize, you soften. Then the silence lifts. And what gets reinforced in that moment is not resolution, it's submission. Your nervous system records a simple lesson. Expressing a need leads to pain, and surrendering that need ends the pain. Repeat this cycle enough times, and you stop expressing needs altogether. You self-censor. You become smaller. That's not a relationship, that's conditioning. But here's where it becomes critical to make the distinction. Not all silence is a weapon. Someone who grew up in a chaotic household may have learned to go quiet as genuine self-regulation. For them, silence is a way to avoid saying something destructive. It's not punishment, it's damage control. The difference lies in three things: duration, pattern, and willingness to reconnect. A person protecting themselves will re-engage. They will acknowledge the silence and explain it. They will work toward resolution even if it's uncomfortable. A person weaponizing silence does none of that. They wait for you to crack. They re-engage only after you've conceded ground. And they never acknowledge that the silence itself was harmful. If you're experiencing the silent treatment, stop chasing the silence. State clearly that you're available to talk when they're ready. Then hold that line. Your pursuit is fuel. Your steadiness is not cruelty, it is self-respect. Now here's the part that will reframe everything. Remember the question from the beginning: weapon or shield? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never confront. Sometimes you are the one using it. Not intentionally, not maliciously. But when you go silent after conflict, ask yourself honestly, are you regulating or are you retaliating? Are you quiet because you need space to process, or because part of you knows that your silence causes them pain, and that pain will bring them back to you? The human capacity for self-deception here is enormous. People routinely convince themselves they need space when what they actually want is power. They dress up punishment as self-care. They call control a boundary. And this is the hardest part of understanding the silent treatment. You have to be willing to apply this lens to yourself, because the same psychological mechanisms that make someone else's silence feel devastating are operating inside you too. The brain that seeks to belong is also the brain that learns to withhold belonging as leverage. Dark psychology isn't just something that happens to you. It lives in every person who has ever been hurt and learned to survive. The question is whether you remain unconscious to it or whether you develop the awareness to choose differently. That awareness is the only real protection, not just from others, from yourself. Silence is never neutral. Every silence in a relationship carries a weight, a direction, an intention. Even when that intention is buried so deep, the person using it can't see it themselves. You now know how it works at the neurological level. You know the cycle it creates. You know how to recognize the difference between someone protecting themselves and someone controlling you. And you know to look inward with the same honesty. If this hits something real for you, stay with that feeling. That discomfort is information. If you want more of this, the psychology beneath the surface, the mechanics of behavior that most people never examine, subscribe to TheMindShadow. A new video drops every week. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Not to accuse, to give them the language for something they've been feeling but couldn't name. I'll see you in the shadows.